you're almost live on Facebook.
Are you sure we're live on Oh, there we go.
There it goes.
We're just a little delayed.
Okay, you're live on Instagram.
Ooh.
Hey, I know that voice.
Hey, that sounds familiar.
That's Danny.
All right. Hi, Instagram. Hi, Facebook. We're not seeing any comments yet on Facebook, so let us know if you're on.
Yep.
You out there,
To
people?
say hello and happy Friday morning. Right? Friday morning? Oh, sorry. I'm going to turn my phone down so you guys don't have to listen to that. That's rude. Hold on. Hold, please.
Yeah. Let me know if there is a...
Oh, here we go. We got
Yay!
Facebook. April Marie says morning. All. Brittany says good morning from Kansas.
There's a little bit of a hum. If that is more annoying than the echo, then let me know.
Okay.
All right.
Celeste says good morning from Oregon. Noelle, Orlando, Florida here.
Ooh. I bet it's hot in Orlando, Florida.
Oh,
How
yeah.
is it,
Yeah.
Noelle? Is it hot?
Yeah, I can feel the heat from here. All right, we've got a couple of people joining from Michigan. Weathered Whimsy, which I love.
Ooh.
I really need to step up my Instagram handle game.
Yeah,
Name
I need
game.
to
Name game.
rebrand
Yes.
in
I do
mine.
too.
It's a little dated.
Yes. But she definitely said something to us. She
Thank
said,
you.
"Hey y'all." We
Michelle
also.
says there's a huge static noise on her end.
Oh.
Yeah. So if that's going to be a problem, then we're going to...
Are you guys hearing any static noises? Let us know.
Let's see. We've got
We
Miss.
sound like we're in a beehive.
All right, that doesn't sound good.
All right, there you go. Now you're just...
Better?
Now you'll
Okay.
just sound like you're...
So we think we removed the static issue, so let us know.
Lots of
Lots of static.
Yeah, sorry, guys.
Hold on. Bear with us, guys.
Ooh, Dee's sitting on the beach
Oh,
watching.
Dee.
Oh, so jealous.
Oh.
Much better.
And you didn't invite us, Dee? That's so sad. All
So
right.
echoey now.
Yeah, it's going to be echoey because it's just coming through the camera.
Sorry, guys. You'll just have to bear
That's-
with us. Hopefully, the echo is a little bit better than the static. Let us know. But it looks like everyone is saying that it's better, so
Yay.
we'll go ahead and get started. So today we are here to talk to you guys about preservatives. So we've had a couple of lives lately where we've really gotten into some educational things, and one thing that always comes up is preservatives, what they are, how to use them. So today we invited our chemist, Bradley, one of our chemists, our formulating chemist, to the live. If you haven't met Bradley before, then here he is in all of his
Nice to meet
glory. We're very excited to have him and to talk a little bit about preservatives. So I think we can go ahead and get started. So I think the first question that always comes up, Bradley, is what is a preservative and why is it needed?
Yeah, so a preservative is really anything that prevents spoilage in a product. So it can be anything from like a chemical or an isolate or an antioxidant or any kind of like chelator, something that binds up metal ions. Really anything that prevents spoilage in a product is known as a preservative. So in the food industry, a preservative would be like citric acid, and that preserves just off the basis of pH. And so really it could be anything that is a preservative. Now, citric acid isn't necessarily a preservative in the cosmetic industry, but in the food industry it's widely used. So say you're like preserving jam. I mean, you use citric acid to preserve your jam because you're bringing the pH down. So
I have citric acid in my cupboard.
that's a preservative.
Can you explain pH levels a little bit and why it makes such a big difference when it comes to preservation?
Yeah, so pH stands for potential hydrogen. It really applies only to water products, and microbes, yeast, and mold will tend to grow in a certain range of pH, which just happens to be the certain range of pH that's best for the human skin and our microbiomes. So really a preservative kind of it kind of counteracts that in between space on the pH scale that with the products that we use. So yeah.
So what kinds of products typically need a preservative, specific to cosmetics?
Yeah, so I mean, I would recommend a preservative on any kind of product, but the specific kind of preservative is what matters. So in an oil-based product, I would recommend using an antioxidant of some kind. So like rosemary antioxidant is a great natural option for that. As for a water-based product, you definitely want to use something like an organic acid or one of its sodium salts or potassium salts. So, for example, sorbic acid, benzoic acid are both organic acids, and then their sodium salt and potassium salt, sodium benzoate, potassium sorbate. Those would be two really typical preservatives in water-based products.
Is there a preservative that works for everything?
No. I wish. That would make my job so much easier. But I mean, there are preservatives that are known to be broad spectrum, which means they cover the whole litany of microbes that we want to ensure are killed off in a product or not present in a product. But generally speaking, just because a product that you put on your skin can vary so greatly, there's really no blanket chemical or blanket like isolate that can be used in everything.
It'd just be too easy.
Yeah, it would be it'd be way too easy.
You mentioned broad spectrum, and I think that's important to touch on because I know, probably not going to speak technical terms to you, Bradley, but certain preservatives that you add actually need like a booster to make it more effective or to be effective for all types of growth. So can you talk a little bit about broad spectrum and
Yeah. So when I say broad spectrum, we're not referring to CBD as in like CBD terms. We're referring to gram-negative bacteria, gram-positive bacteria, yeasts and molds, really anything that grows in a water-based product or with water added to it. And so what we look for is a preservative that really kind of covers that entire range of microbial growth. And so in order to do that, sometimes we need to use more of a preservative. And what Emily's saying with these preservative boosters is it lowers the amount of actual preservative that we need to use. So it makes the preservatives much more effective. So then we can use lower amounts of them, which are much less sensitizing to the skin and really better for you. So
what would be an example of one of these boosters?
So ethyl hexylglycerin, capryliglycol, and then another really popular one is glycerol caprylate. That one's like the supernatural option. But as you get more natural, it gets harder to work with and all that. So yeah, those would be considered preservative boosting effects. Really what they do is they kind of they make the cell walls of the bacterium or yeast or mold much more easy for the preservatives to penetrate. So they kind of enhance their preservative effectiveness.
That's awesome. I like that you touched a little bit on natural because I think we always want to have as natural of products as possible. But in my mind, preservatives are just as important, if not more important, than being natural because you have to have a safe product. We don't want our customers applying things to their skin that could lead to like a nasty infection or something along those lines. So can you talk a little bit about natural? Are there any preservatives that are natural? What does that look like? Are there any complications from using those kinds of products?
Yeah, and there are many natural preservative options that are just straight extracted from plants. Grapefruit seed extract is a good one. There's the radish root ferment, which we're heavily considering for our own products. And then there are some essential oils that show pretty good effects against certain specific bacteria. The issue that arises though is these natural extracts. In nature they're very good at targeting specific types of bacterium or microbes or yeast or mold. So they're not very broad spectrum. So with that, what we have to do when we're using really natural products or really natural preservatives is ensure that they have that broad spectrum kill off. And that may be like decreasing the water level or increasing or decreasing the pH, kind of really tailoring that environment that the preservatives are in to work best with that product.
Gotcha. So it's not as simple as just adding it to any product. You really have to
Right.
create an environment where it can be successful.
Yes, and and there has to be an understanding of every single factor can inhibit or like decrease bacterial growth. Like you're really building an environment that like isn't suitable for bacteria, yeast, and mold, but is suitable for the human skin and the body, and just giving your body the best that you can, really.
Knowing how complicated it can be to use preservatives in products, is there any kind of preservative that you would recommend for our customers to use in like at-home DIYs, specifically those water-based products, or if they're using hydrosols, things like that?
Absolutely. And so I would definitely recommend Optifin if you're working with a water-based product. And there are many trade names under the Optifin name. What I would look for, though, is Optifin Plus. That one is a blend of phenoxyethanol and caprylaglycol. Very, very useful at 1% or below. You don't want to go over 1%. It's kind of overkill. And yeah, that's the best recommendation I can give. There are many other preservatives out there, and so many that I don't feel comfortable giving like an entire breakdown of all of those, just because they get way too complicated.
Right.
But Optifin, I would definitely recommend Optifin.
One thing that I have learned in researching preservatives a bit is that the suppliers that you're working with often have some really great information in regards to what kinds of formulas you can use the preservative in. So the pH range, what kind of like viscosity of the product that it works well with, things like that. So if you guys are looking for a preservative for a specific product, it's always great to look at that supplier information as well if you're not really sure which pathway to go down. With that said, Bradley, are there preservatives that you wouldn't recommend using in products, and are there preservatives that at Plant Therapy we specifically stay away from?
Yeah, but first I do want to say happy birthday to Dion.
Oh, happy
birthday.
birthday.
I just caught that out of the corner of my eye. I'm like,
love
oh,
that.
happy birthday. So yeah, I would definitely steer against any kind of paraben. Methylparaben, propylparaben. There's a lot of information out there and a lot of studies that have been done that show it to be very skin sensitizing and somewhat toxic. And so depending on its use level, it can cause problems with the skin. And in addition to that, I would definitely recommend against DMDM hydantoin, isothalazones. Those both are formaldehyde donors, and we don't want formaldehyde in our products. And then there's also a class that can produce nitrosamines, which are also cancerous. Look for chlorphenesin. Look for I think I wrote it down somewhere. Let me see.
I stole Bradley's notes.
Yeah, there's a lot of words, so they're hard to remember.
But long story short, we do have a blog on preservatives that is in the process of being updated. Bradley was reviewing it yesterday and had some really great feedback on how we can improve it. And I think we can include a lot of this information on that blog post as well.
Yeah, definitely. And so another one that I'd like you guys to look out for is quaternium 15, specifically quaternium 15. You'll see a lot of quaternium in your hair care products, but specifically quaternium 15 is a preservative that you do want to avoid. And then there's another class called the imidazoliadimils. It's a really Too many D's in the word. But look for urea. Any product that's preserved with this specific enantiomer of urea is not good to put on your skin. And then the other one that I was trying to think of that is kind of the same as chlorphenesin is Bronopol. That's one that you definitely want to look out for in your products.
So SW has asked a couple times about rosemary extract, and is that a good preservative? Is it safe for somebody who isn't really knowledgeable in this to just use as preservative, or would you maybe recommend something else?
No, rosemary extract is a great preservative, but only for oil-based products. So it won't do any sort of it won't have any sort of antimicrobial effects in water-based products because it's not water soluble. And it really doesn't have an antimicrobial effect. It prevents oils from oxidizing. So like your oleic acids and things that are in like the oil constituents like stearic acid, it prevents those from spoiling with time and oxidizing.
Okay, good. One thing that we get asked a lot is using vinegar in water and using that as a preservative. Can you talk a little bit about whether or not that's true?
Yeah, so vinegar is acetic acid, and so the mechanism of preservation there is really you're lowering the pH to a point to where nothing can grow in it, and so acetic acid isn't necessarily a preservative, but it preserves by lowering the pH of whatever it's in.
Okay, that's really...
So it does work as a preservative. You just need a pretty decent amount of it to be effective as a preservative.
One thing that I didn't have a lot of visibility of for a long time was preservative efficacy testing and how we really go about showing that a preservative is effective in a product. So can you talk a little bit about that and what we do in order to say that we feel confident that our preservative is being effective?
Yes. So in the United States, there is a standard for preservative effectiveness testing. It's a USP grade test, and it tests for Pseudomonas streptococcus, E. coli, Listeria, and I think there's one more bacterium that it tests for, and then it tests for yeast and mold. And so what we do is we send a product out for challenge testing. This test lasts about a month, and what they do is they inoculate our product with those bacterium, yeast, or mold, and then we see how effective that preservative is, hence preservative effective testing. And so that's really how we gauge the effectiveness of our preservatives in products.
And really, that's how anyone could gauge it, right? I mean,
right.
If you're interested in figuring out, if you're making a product and you want to look into how effective your system is, that is something you can look into. It is quite costly, so mostly it's at-home formulators or people like Plant Therapy, companies that are creating products, but it is something that is really interesting to look into and fun to have some visibility of. Another thing that comes up a lot, Bradley, is using like ethanol or like a very heavy or an alcohol with a high content of alcohol as a preservative in a product. Is that something that can be used as a preservative?
Absolutely. Alcohol is very widely used for preservation. We were actually considering it for a little bit with our hydrosols, but decided that wouldn't be the best option for you guys. So with alcohol, with preserving a product, what you want to do is have the content of the ethanol to be at about 15 to 20%, and you'll get great preservation. Anything lower than that, and you're not going to get very good kill-off. There's more water than alcohol, and then there are many other factors that can affect the effectiveness of the alcohol as a preservative. So my general rule of thumb is 15 to 20%, and you should be golden.
And with that, can you add, so let's say you're making like a facial toner and you're using alcohol as your preservative, which may not be the best example because alcohol is a little drying, but bear with me. If you wanted to add a carrier to that product to help with some of the drying, could that be done? And if so, how would you recommend going about it?
Well, I mean, you're kind of mixing oil and water, which doesn't always work. That would have to be something that would be tested. You want to make sure that that there's no separation in your solution, that it's a completely homogeneous product. I wouldn't typically use alcohol as an emulsifier. I use it more as a solvent or a carrier. Like say you wanted to make a perfume or something, you would use a certain amount of alcohol, a certain amount of water, and a certain amount of essential oil. If you wanted to make a oil-based a product with oil in it, I typically would recommend using some kind of emulsifier. Now, alcohol does have an emulsifying-like effect, but it's not directly emulsifying in the traditional sense. It does pull it into a solution of sorts, but it's not traditional emulsification. So, yes, you could do that. You could 100% do that, and that would just be on your own discretion because I've never done that before, so I can't really speak
and
to
it sounds like it would be a bit of a complicated formulation. So depending on the kind of product, you may just want to look at creating the water-based product and then applying the carrier oil after, so that you can still get the moisturizing benefits of the carrier, but not have to deal with the complicated formulation of approaching it that way.
Yeah.
Let's see.
I think it would be interesting to talk a little bit about why preservatives get such a bad rap. And from your perspective, Bradley, doing so much research on this subject, and there's just a constant barrage of preservative-free, don't use preservatives, it's not natural if it has a preservative. How can we express, the importance of preservative? Like, based on using these different ingredients, the dangers versus just keeping something unpreserved,
Yeah, well, the danger really lies in contamination. You can't always see bacteria, yeast, or mold, and when you can see them, it's far beyond too late. Like, the product is already completely gone off, so to speak. So then the danger really lies in the unknowing. The not knowing what specific bacteria or what level it's at in your product. And so it's kind of like insurance using a preservative. And to give you kind of a an understanding of this, like if you were to just pour water into a bottle and then like the bottle wasn't completely clean, there could be something residual in that bottle that causes growth, and growth can be like almost logarithmic. Like it will go up and up and up until it can't go up anymore and it plateaus, and then that whole bottle is just microbial growth. So does that answer your question? I just firmly believe that some level of preservation is required in a product. And even when you do make a preservative-free claim, there is a level of self-preservation that goes into that.
We have some kids looking at our show right now.
Oh, we're going to have some visitors.
Oh, are you live?
Yeah, come on in.
Do you want to see the boys and girls club?
Yeah,
Sure.
We got some boys and girls club.
Come say hi to our customers.
Say hi.
We got our kids over there. You can use your iPad. You can
We're just doing a boys and girls tour.
boys and girls.
Are you guys having a good summer?
Hello. We come in peace.
Okay, let's leave. Say bye. Say thank you.
Bye.
How long have you been
Leave the stuff down.
We come in peace.
Forever.
Like come in peace.
Yeah. We just live here.
Leave the stuff
Say come on.
Okay, guys, come on.
Thank you. Sorry.
Bella, look.
Elsa, such fun
Bessie Turner
surprises.
says, "Hi, Paul."
That's probably the best surprise of our lives.
That was good, yeah.
That was so fun. Take a break from talking about heavy preservatives.
I know, how fun.
Yes.
Doing a tour, that's awesome.
Lighten the mood a little bit.
So I just kind of showed, I came in a little bit halfway here, but Bradley, you were talking about the importance of preservatives. Ideally, it would be wonderful if everything we made we could just make right there and
Danny's
use
doing
it.
this, you guys. So,
But
making stuff.
because we are making something for a large audience, it makes it impossible. It's pretty impossible to make something for a large audience. We don't know when you're going to get the product.
Yeah.
We don't know how long you're going to use it. But if in our own homes you could control all of those variables, then you wouldn't necessarily need that preservative because you'd have all that control. But where we don't have that.
Really, that's what it comes down to, is trying to control those variables without knowing exactly what those variables are.
Mm-hmm.
So, say you have like a body lotion in a jar, and you bring that into your shower. You're introducing moisture and any other type of variable into that product. Those kids are so cute.
Debbie says as well as climate changes too. That's important.
Yes, exactly.
The heat and shipment can cause issues. It's just such a different environment if you are producing something in a really large amount that has to sit on a shelf for a certain amount of time, as opposed to making something in your kitchen where you can control your environment. You know how quickly you're going to use it.
Right.
It's so very, very different to make sure that you guys are safe when you get our product.
Exactly. And with DIYs, I think I saw someone ask this question a little bit earlier. How long is it acceptable to keep a DIY? And it really does depend if it's a water product or an oil product. For oil products, I mean, indefinitely, unless it starts to smell rancid, like a rancid oil. For a water product, I mean, I would keep a water product. This is just my personal opinion. I would only keep a water product for like 2 or 3 weeks without a preservative. Anything longer than that, and I'm just the way that my brain works, I'm going to automatically assume that there is some level of contamination there.
Yeah. And for those 2 to 3 weeks, it should be in the fridge too, right?
Yeah, and you definitely want to kind of control those environmental factors so those microbes don't grow.
Well, I believe it is JL Mommy's birthday as well on Instagram, so we
Happy
have to give her a happy
birthday.
birthday too. So many birthdays
I
today.
know.
And it's a Friday, you lucky ladies.
I know.
Does anyone have any tips on keeping hydrosols fresh when traveling with them? Is there anything that Patty can do while she's traveling on vacation that she can do to help preserve that shelf life?
Absolutely. So I travel with hydrosols a lot, and what I do is I actually just use like a 30 ml glass bottle, and I'll fill that up all the way to the top. What's important is you want it small enough so that there's not a lot of head space, so there's not a lot of space in the container. And also, if you can, to keep it cool, which I know can be difficult, but if you're traveling with a cooler, that is really ideal. And we did have another question from Debbie about hydrosols. Do your tests come back with any of the following: chloroform, yeast, mold? And is there an acceptable amount for being able to sell these? So we do microbe test our hydrosols frequently, as well as pH test them, because a variance in pH is going to show us that something is happening in that hydrosol that wasn't happening before, and that's likely due to some kind of growth, and then we would resend it again.
Yeah, so we do very, very closely monitor our hydrosols to ensure that our customers aren't getting any product with any kind of growth.
And that's unfortunately too why you see that a lot are out of stock at
Yes.
times. If something comes in and it's not good, obviously we're not going to sell it. And it is quite a long process too to get these in, to get them tested, and to maintain this quality. And so, like we discussed last week, we are very heavily investigating preservatives, not only just to keep it safe when it's in your hands, with less variance in how you're storing it. It also allows us to just keep these products around for a longer amount of time. So it's not always inconveniently out of stock or in stock just for a little bit and out of stock, just because our quality measures with our hydrosols is very intense because it is currently unpreserved water-based product.
Yes, and we do only source hydrosols during the cool months of the year as well, to ensure that they're not being exposed to any heat or anything like that that could lead to growth during transit.
Yeah, and April, I like that point you made, small batch versus large batch, where we are specifically dealing with smaller batch sizes here, so we do have like a certain level of control in our system. Whereas some other companies, they may have much larger batch sizes where they have a little bit less quality control, so then they need to implement more strenuous preservative procedures, where I would say I judge plant therapy as being like very moderate in our preservative effectiveness, or not effectiveness, preservative levels, just because we are able to closely monitor our small batch sizes. I saw another comment that was really interesting.
Can we go up?
Yes, so Debbie, yes, we there is a certain level that we choose there. So the international standard sets for about, I think it's like 1 billion coliform per unit, and which is very, very, very like microscopic. That is like the limit at which we would sell a hydrosol at this current point in time. So what our goal is, though, is to get to a point where we have these fully preserved. So then there is no risk whatsoever of those coliforms growing. And so anything that you pull out of nature has risk of growing a bacterium, yeast, or mold. It's just the level at which that occurs can be detrimental to a product.
Debbie is asking at home, how do you know if a hydrosol has gone bad? And I think the first step that you're really looking at is paying attention to the shelf life, right? So it's important, if you have exceeded that shelf life but you're not seeing any kind of growth or smell change or anything like that, we still wouldn't recommend using it because it is beyond the shelf life that we recommend keeping it for. Beyond that, you can look for a shift in smell, the way it appears, but really sometimes it is hard to tell. So I would definitely lean into the shelf life recommendations that we share on our website.
And if you want to get really scientific with it, there are at-home micro tests that you can do. I believe there are some DIY websites that have at-home micro tests, and they're not very accurate. But if you suspect a hydrosol to have bloomed off, if you see those little floating particulates in it, and it is expired, go for it. I mean, do the science yourself. I mean, I highly recommend it. Science is my favorite.
Another alternative to monitor that is when you first receive your hydrosol is to do like a pH test, is to log it.
Absolutely.
Within a few months, try it again. Is there any variance in the pH? And that can indicate if something's going a little awry.
Yeah, that's great.
Monitoring your own pH, I like it.
Fun story. Yesterday, I let my 4-year-old take a drink of my water, and when he gave it back to me, it had some blue. Pretty crazy.
I wonder how that happened. The other thing is, if you're not using your hydrosols regularly, all day, every day, you may consider purchasing smaller amounts. Just because you want to be able to go through that quickly, and if you're not using your hydrosol within that shelf life, then it's really important that you adjust how much you're ordering so that, you know, it doesn't go to waste and you can closer monitor that. Also, as Katrina was mentioning earlier about headspace, if it is taking some time for you to get through a bottle, you may want to transfer your hydrosol into a bottle with less headspace. Just be sure that when you're doing any kind of transferring that the bottle that you transfer it in is sanitized before you bring it over, but minimizing the headspace will help as well.
And a way that you can do that is just rinse it out with a high alcohol solution, and that'll pretty much sanitize the inside of the bottle. You just want to let it dry out before you repurpose it for hydrosols.
And for Debbie, mine are crystal clear and almost 3 years old, kept in the fridge. One isn't even opened. Still, because it is so far past its shelf life, I would be very hesitant to use it. I'd probably recommend getting fresh ones. I really go by the mantra that hydrosols do not get better with age. Some essential oils do, you know, but hydrosols are very, very different. You should get them and use them while they are fresh, and then just replenish as needed. Buy smaller amounts at a time if you're not going through them fast enough, but just use them when you got them. They don't get better with age.
But they are amazing.
Yeah.
No doubt about it.
I do use hydrosols very frequently. My favorite is rose hydrosol. I love to use it for my face, my hair, my body. And then I would say peppermint is probably a close second. I just love how uplifting it is, cooling to the skin. So yeah, just make sure that you're using them frequently and not just sitting on them for too long.
Helichrysum is my favorite.
I love
Perfect for
helichrysum.
days.
Yep.
It stinks, but
I like how it smells. A little dirty.
that's my opinion.
What about freezing hydrosols?
You know, I actually have not thought of that concept. So, in my mind, though, I would imagine that a hydrosol would be safe to freeze. Now, don't take that at face value, as I have never tested that before. But from like a scientific perspective, the the molecules that go into a hydrosol are highly polar, so they are soluble in water, which in my mind, when something freezes, there's no polarity shift. So those molecules that are soluble in water shouldn't come out of solution with that. But that's just me analyzing the situation. I have never tested that before. So
I would be a little concerned about condensation that could form while thawing. Because then if there's condensation, then that would be H2O and drop back into it. Could that possibly, interfere with the chemical makeup of the hydrosol? If you're freezing, thawing,
I don't know.
Yeah.
I simply don't know. That's something that I'd have to test.
Last week we talked about this a little bit, and where we kind of landed was that we did want to do some experimentation. So I don't think Katrina or I talked to Bradley about that afterwards, but we do want to do some testing to just get into it a little bit more and be able to provide you guys with more educated feedback instead of just kind of assumptions. So we will look into that.
Yeah, and last week I know I talked about not freezing them. I was thinking specifically in like a plastic bottle where there would be headspace and that condensation could form. There was a question about using an ice cube tray and freezing them that way, which I didn't consider. So we will definitely add that, to our list of research for hydrosols to make sure we're giving the best information.
And I know we've gotten a little bit off track with hydrosols, but I think that it's an important piece of this conversation in regards to preservatives. But Bradley, is there anything that we missed when we were discussing preservatives that you'd like to touch on?
Can I say that?
Yes.
Let's see. I have my terrible handwriting notes. Oh, yeah. So one thing I would like to talk about is essential oils. So there is a lot of information out there on essential oils being antimicrobial. And the great thing about essential oils is they are very antimicrobial, but they're very specifically antimicrobial. So the chemicals in essential oils are found in nature, and so the bacterium are also found in nature. So a lot of those bacterium have adapted through time to be resistant to certain essential oils. And so, for example, tea tree is very, very good at yeast and mold, but there are certain very uncommon, be it, bacterium that are resistant to tea tree. So tea tree would not be considered a broad spectrum. But if you blended tea tree with something like grapefruit and grapefruit and thought I could do it without my notes. Grapefruit, 1,8-cineol, specifically any oil that contains 1,8-cineol, and tea tree. Like, you could make a pretty good broad spectrum preservative on your own. I mean, it might not smell great in whatever product you're using, but it would be very effective against those microbes at a certain level, and that would just be something you'd have to test.
And then we've got this question from Brittany. How do you approach a company that shares DIY recipes containing water, no preservative, and a recommended 3 to 6 month shelf life? My first recommendation would be, without seeing like the recipes themselves, would be just to reach out to that company and to get their reasoning why it's a 3 to 6 month shelf life. But of course, the way you store it would also need to be considered, the other ingredients. But as if I were a consumer checking this out, I would probably be a little concerned and want to understand that company's reasoning behind a 3 to 6 month shelf life, which is pretty extensive for a water product with no preservative. So it might be a red flag to look into.
And I mean, there are a lot of different factors to consider. And most companies, they do say something with the basis of thinking that they're right. And they very well could be right. You just want to do that investigation on your own and really look at all the factors that are going into what they're saying. And so being scrutinizing methodologies is really how science works. You want to scrutinize the process and be very analytical and like A to B to C to D. If it doesn't make sense, then reassess and come back to it later. But so it really just have to use logic and reasoning and science.
Sally's asking if preservatives have a shelf life.
Yes. Really, anything can have a shelf life because with time, oxidative reactions occur. Sunlight tends to break things down. Really, anything that you use or is produced on a massive scale does have a shelf life, and that is something that you should consider. I would say, though, that most antioxidants have probably a shelf life of about 2 to 3 years. They're usually good for that long.
We did have a question about sanitizing bottles and what kind of alcohol you would use to sanitize the bottle.
I've seen us posting online saying that Everclear is a good solution, and I would recommend using Everclear if you can't buy an alcohol solution. Perfumer's alcohol is great too. It's just standard denatured alcohol. Really, if you want to look for the actual chemical term, SDA 40B is pretty typical as a perfumer's alcohol, and that one would be very effective at killing any sort of microbial growth.
Great, thank you. Well, that's all the questions on Instagram that I'm seeing, but I did back out of it more than once, so I lost some of you guys. So if there's something that we missed, be sure to chime in really quickly. But that is what I'm seeing on Instagram.
I know we had a few questions about carrier oils and their shelf life.
We do have a carrier oil shelf life download on our downloads page. So if you just head on over to planttherapy.com/downloads or click on learn and downloads, it will take you to that page that has a list of all of our carrier oils and their shelf life, because it is dependent on the carrier. Some carriers like jojoba have a really nice long shelf life, while others are much shorter. Hemp seed carrier, for example, I think has like 6 to 9 months.
Yeah.
Sunflower is another one that I think is pretty low. It's noticeable though when one of your oils.
The rancidity is very potent.
Yeah.
When evening primrose goes off, it smells like fish to me. Like, it's not a good smell.
But rest assured, it's not microbes. It's just the oil going bad. So
We did, Josie Murphy asked that she had missed what the shelf life of a hydrosol is. So Katrina, is that dependent on the hydrosol, or is it, generally 1 year or less?
Generally, we do give 1 year. You could dive in a little further. Some have a lower shelf life if it has a higher pH level. It may be less stable than something that has a lower pH level to be more acidic, but we generally do the rule of 1 year.
And it's best to keep in the freezer.
Yes.
Or fridge, not freezer. Have to test the freezer.
We'll get back to
you on that.
Oh, and thank you, Stephanie, for linking the carrier oil chart. That's fantastic.
Debbie says evening primrose smells funky right out the gate. It does.
It's a little funky. It's a great carrier, but it's a little funky.
Yeah, I definitely like to do just a little bit and blend with other carrier oils.
And maybe some EOs to help. Alrighty, well, unless there's any last minute questions, I think we can go ahead and wrap it up for the day. We definitely appreciate you guys joining. Thank you, Bradley, for coming and talking to our customers. This is one of my favorite lives that we've had so far. I love learning about preservatives, and I think it's a very important subject that we don't know enough about, except for you. So thank you for joining. Next week we will be talking about essential oil safety with pets, I believe.
I think so.
Don't quote me on that, but I believe that is what we are talking about, so we're really looking forward to that. I hope everyone has a happy Friday, and thanks for joining. We'll see y'all next time.
Bye.